Do you want to fall prey to the communist menace? One of the easiest ways to fall prey to the communist menace is to start smoking marijuana cigarettes, also known as joints, weed, ganja, reefer, or the wacky tobacco. Marijuana cigarettes are a gateway drug, and within a week of smoking your first marijuana cigarette, you can find yourself in the gutters in an opium-induced coma. Now, one of the ways to stave off the temptation of smoking marijuana is to get into other activities such as schoolwork, or perhaps getting into a debate and forensic program, learn a musical instrument, learn how to play sports, or get into fishing or the shooting sports. One of my favorite sayings is, instead of chasing a powerful high, you need to chase the high power.
Welcome to the Milsurp Mike channel. The Browning High Power is one of the most iconic pistols ever designed, serving both sides during the Second World War, as well as police and militaries the world over afterward. The High Power was the first semi-auto pistol to finally detach the British military from their love of top-break revolvers well after the war. Basically, the High Power is the grandfather of the Wonder Nines of the 70s and 80s. In the early 1920s, the French military embarked on finding a pistol to replace the antiquated and underpowered M1892 Lebel revolver. The requirements for the new pistol required a compact pistol that held at least a 10-round capacity magazine, a magazine disconnect device, an external hammer, a positive safety, and must be easily to disassemble with the ability to kill a man at 50 meters. This called for a 9mm caliber cartridge. FN commissioned John Moses Browning to design a new pistol for this purpose. Since he'd sold the rights to the 1911 to Colt, he worked on designing an all-new pistol going around the 1911 patents. Browning developed two different single-action striker-fired pistols. Talk about being ahead of his time. These both fired the venerable 9x19mm Parabellum or Luger cartridge. One was a blowback design and the other used a locking system similar to the 1911. The pistol had a 15-round double-stack magazine. Now, let me step aside here for a moment to say that I don't get into primary resource depth research like Othais from C&N Arsenal or Ian McCollum from Forgotten Weapons. The history of these firearms I give you barely scratched the surface, and digging too deep would be very time-consuming for someone who makes these videos as a hobby. I say all that to basically make the excuse that in my surface-level research, I find conflict as to who made the 15-round magazine. Whether it was Browning going against his judgment since he believed an 8-round single stack was all you needed, or whether it was Dieudonné Sèvres, someone who I'll get to in a moment, providing a magazine he developed to Browning. Either way, FN decided to go further with the lock breech design, as the blowback prototype lacked the robustness demanded for the French trials, and Browning filed for a patent on June 28, 1923. It was not granted until February 1927, 4 months after his death. Dieudonné Sèvres was tasked with finishing and improving Browning's last pistol design. Before I go further on the pistol, I just want to mention that Sèvres is perhaps the most underrated weapons designer of the 20th century. Not only did he end up making the High Power into what we know it as, he is also responsible for the FAL, otherwise known as the right arm of the free world, as well as the rifle that should have been chosen over the M14 in the United States. Just think if Stoner had helped develop the Beretta 92 series or Glock pistols. That is how important these two firearms have been in the 20th century. Back to the subject at hand. The 1911 patents Colts held expired in 1928, so this gave FN and Sèvres many more options in developing the pistol. First, the pistol went from striker-fired to single-action hammer-fired. He redesigned the trigger with new thumb and magazine safeties. Sèvres reduced the magazine capacity to 13 to save weight, as well as curving the grip. These incrementally improved pistols were entered in various military trials around the world, including France's crowded competition in 1933. This trial produced more recommendations to the manufacturers, and only 4 pistols were entered in the subsequent trial in 1934, FN's pistol being one of them. Since there was political pressure in France to choose a pistol built by a French company, the Charles Petter designed SACM pistol was chosen as the MLE 1935 and 765 by 20 long. This did not deter FN as they released the Pistolet Browning Grande Puissance, or the Browning High Power pistol in 1935. Even though the final product was far from Browning's design, Attaching his name to it helped guarantee its success. It was adopted in Belgium as the P-35, as well as several other smaller nations. When World War II broke out, plans for the high power were smuggled to Canada, where they were produced by English for Allied use, namely Nationalist Chinese. Germany took over the FN plant, which built high powers for use in the Third Reich. My high power with the wooden grips is one of these pistols, and I'll do a separate video on it. After the war, FN continued to produce high power pistols, as more and more military and police forces around the world adopted this pistol, notably Great Britain in 1954. They finally adopted a modern semi-auto pistol. The high power was incredibly popular on the civilian market as well, even in the United States where 45 or die prevailed for decades. Although FN continued to improve the high power over the years, its popularity finally gave way to the single-action, double-action, or double-action only Wonder 9s of the 70s and 80s, and later the polymer-frame striker-fired pistols that now flood the market. The pistol quietly ended production in 2017. I own two high-power pistols, the German occupation pistol I mentioned earlier, and a surplus, to my best guess, Israeli police pistol, of which I did an unboxing of a long time ago. I've obtained some Mech-Gar magazines and took them both out. I experienced the pluses of the high power, namely its modern capacity, good balance, and ruggedness. I also experienced the main complaints against the pistol, namely its heavy trigger pull and tendency to give you hammer bite. These two complaints are why Americans who shot 1911s over the years tended to look down upon the high power. Still, it could be argued the high power was the best military pistol in service during the Second World War, and pretty much one of the best in the worldwide until a Wonder 9, the Beretta M9, replaced the 1911 in the United States. Great Britain only officially replaced the high power in 2013 with the Glock 17. Please be aware of where your elected officials and the groups who claim to represent you stand on the Second Amendment. Please join the GOA, the premier no-compromise Second Amendment organization, as well as your state groups. If you like my content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, please check out my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and who I support on Patreon. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.